Chapter 1. Someone is killing people. Richard Elgood was 60 years old. He walked into the office. Peter Pascoe smiled. He shook Elgood's hand. "Sit down, Mr. Elgood," Pascoe said. "How can I help?" Elgood did not smile. "I don't know how to start," he said. Pascoe waited. "Please tell me," he said. Elgood took a deep breath. "A man in my company," he said. "I think he is killing people." Pascoe was tired. He worked all night waiting for burglars. "Tell me more," he said. "I wanted to tell Andy Dalziel," Elgood said. "But if he trusts you, I do too." Pascoe nodded. "Who is the man?" he asked. Elgood hesitated. Then he whispered, "Patrick Alderman." Later, Pascoe told Dalziel. Dalziel laughed. "Dick is strange, but not crazy." "You know him?" Pascoe asked. "For years," Dalziel said. "He is rich. He loves silk shirts and gold rings. He loves women, too." "What do you want me to do?" Pascoe asked. "Tell me everything," Dalziel said. "Elgood thinks Alderman killed 2 men," Pascoe said. "Who?" Dalziel asked. "Brian Bulmer and Timothy Eagles," Pascoe said. "How did they die?" Dalziel asked. "Bulmer crashed his car. Eagles had a heart attack," Pascoe said. "Why does Elgood think Alderman did it?" "Alderman gave Bulmer too many drinks. Then Bulmer drove home and crashed. Alderman also shared an office with Eagles. Why would Alderman want them dead?" "He wants a better job," Pascoe said. Dalziel laughed. "Dick believes that?" "There is more," Pascoe said. "Tell me," Dalziel said. "Elgood and Alderman had a fight. Elgood said he would not promote Alderman. Later, Elgood got an electric shock from his lamp. The next day, his garage door almost fell on him." Dalziel scratched his belly. "Why doesn't Elgood want to promote Alderman?" he asked. "Alderman is not good at his job, and some directors want him on the board," Pascoe said. Dalziel thought. "We should meet Alderman," he said. "But how?" Pascoe smiled. "I have an idea," he said. "Sergeant Weald told me about a car. The owner is Daphne Alderman. She lives at Rosemont House." Chapter 2. Daphne makes a new friend. Patrick Alderman stood in his garden, enjoying the smell of his roses. He was young, handsome, and had a happy family. But today he had things to do. His wife Daphne needed a ride because her car was being repaired. He also had to talk to the gardeners about leaving the greenhouse door open. Daphne was tall and blonde. She had married Patrick young, soon after her father died. She had a good life, but felt she didn't truly understand her husband. He was always calm, as if he knew the future. Patrick drove her to their daughter's school. It was sunny when they left, but by the time they arrived, it looked like rain. Daphne refused his offer to wait and drive her to town. She noticed a group of women holding signs protesting private schools. "Ignore them," Patrick said, and left. Soon the rain started. Daphne stood alone, getting wet. Then she saw a woman with short black hair putting a baby into a car. The woman smiled. "Do you need a ride?" Daphne hesitated but got in. She saw a protest sign in the back seat. "Don't worry," the woman said. "I won't talk about it." Daphne admired the baby and called her a boy. The woman laughed. She's a girl. Her name is Rose. Why should pink be for girls and blue for boys? She introduced herself as Ellie Pascoe. They stopped for coffee. The cafe was small and busy. Daphne felt out of place, but Ellie enjoyed watching her reaction. 2 policemen walked in. One of them, Wedderburn, greeted Ellie, calling her Mrs. Pascoe. Daphne was surprised. Ellie's husband was a detective. Curious, Daphne asked, "If my husband did something wrong, would you tell yours?" Ellie smiled but did not answer. Chapter 3. The most important thing. Patrick Alderman worked in an office. His boss, Timothy Eagles, died from a heart attack. Before that, Brian Bulmer died in a car crash after the office party. Patrick was with both before they died. Richard Elgood, the company boss, did not trust Patrick. Some people wanted Patrick to get a promotion, but Elgood said no. Patrick only smiled and did not argue. After this, Elgood got an electric shock from his desk lamp. The next morning, his garage door almost fell on him. He was scared and called London to check something about Patrick. That evening, Patrick went home. His wife Daphne was in the garden. 2 police officers arrived to ask about her scratched car. Sergeant Weald wanted to watch Patrick, but Patrick was calm. He showed Weald his greenhouse. Inside, Patrick held a sharp knife and smiled. "I love my roses," he said. "I cut off the old flowers so new ones can grow." The greenhouse had a locked cupboard with dangerous poison inside. Weald looked at Patrick. Something felt wrong. Chapter 4. Another death at Elgood Ceramics. Peter Pascoe was playing with his baby Rose at home. He sang a funny song about his boss, Dalziel, to make her laugh. His wife, Ellie, walked in and smiled. "What did Dalziel do now?" she asked. "Nothing much," Pascoe said. "But he is making me work on this Elgood and Alderman case, and I don't know why." "Isn't it all nonsense?" Ellie asked. "I think so," Pascoe said. "Sergeant Weald went to meet the aldermans. He found nothing." Pascoe didn't tell Ellie everything. He didn't mention the poisons Patrick kept in his greenhouse. There was no proof of any crime. "I'll have to tell Elgood he is imagining things," Pascoe said. "Still," Ellie said, "many people have died at Elgood Ceramics. That company doesn't seem very safe." "Only 2 deaths," Pascoe said. Just then, the phone rang. Pascoe picked it up, listened, and looked serious. "There was one more death," he told Ellie. "A man named Chris Burke. He fell from a ladder and died. He worked as Eagle's assistant." "And then Patrick got his job?" Ellie asked. "Yes," Pascoe said. Ellie frowned. "So, people keep dying, and Patrick keeps getting better jobs?" Pascoe didn't reply, but he started to wonder. Chapter 5. Forget I ever came to see you. Pascoe met Elgood in his office. Elgood looked busy and nervous. "I made a mistake coming to the police," Elgood said. "I don't want detectives asking questions." Pascoe placed a bag on the desk. "Your desk lamp and garage door. No proof of a crime." Elgood sighed. "So I worried for nothing?" "One more thing," Pascoe said. "A man named Chris Burke fell from a ladder and died. After that, Patrick Alderman got his job. That was 4 years ago. Just an accident, Elgood replied. Pascoe saw an old company photo. Who's Eddie Alderman? Patrick's great-uncle, Elgood said. A smart accountant who spent all his money on his house and garden. So Patrick changed his name to Alderman? Pascoe asked. Yes, he wanted to be like Eddie, Elgood said. But he isn't as smart. People like him, though. He has charm. Then Elgood looked serious. Forget what I said. Drop it. As Pascoe left, he saw Patrick Alderman near his car. A rare blue rose was pinned to his coat. Can I give you a lift? Patrick asked. No, thanks, Pascoe said. But your rose is beautiful. It's called Blue Moon, Patrick said, handing it to him. It means improbability. Life is full of surprises. Pascoe took the rose, feeling uneasy. Chapter 6. Shahid Singh investigates police cadet. Shahid Singh was in trouble. He met his old school friends, and they took his police hat as a joke. They passed it around, laughing. A woman's voice interrupted. Excuse me, officer, can you help me? Singh turned and saw Ellie Pascoe. She wanted directions. Yes, of course, Singh said. His friends quickly gave his hat back. As they walked, Ellie smiled. I saved you, didn't I? Singh nodded. They aren't bad guys, just bored. You're lucky, Singh, Ellie said. You found a job. I could have worked in my dad's shop, Singh said, but I wanted to be in the police. Are you enjoying it? Sometimes it's boring. I want to get promoted fast. They reached the cafe where Ellie was meeting Daphne Alderman. Singh noticed them together and walked back to the station, thinking about Daphne. At the station, he spoke to David Bradley, who had investigated the scratched cars. That Alderman woman, Singh asked. Did she have any shopping with her? No, Bradley said. She just jumped in her car and left. Why? Singh thought for a moment. Why did she lie about shopping all day? Part 1. Death in the Rose Garden. Mrs. Alderman loved her garden, but today it looked bad. Her gardeners, Mr. Caldecott and his son Dick, were not working well. She knew why. She did not give a job to Dick's son, Brent. Brent had stolen fruit from her garden. Mrs. Alderman was very angry. She wanted to fire the Caldecotts. She picked up her sharp knife. She cut dead flowers from a rose bush. The flowers fell into her bucket. Then she felt someone watching her. Patrick, she called. Come here. A small boy walked to her. He was about 11 years old, but he looked younger. His face was pale. He did not smile. Mrs. Alderman looked at him. She always felt angry when she saw Patrick. She was angry when her niece Penelope had this child. She was angrier when Penelope did not say who the father was. Mrs. Alderman was always angry. She was angry when her husband, Eddie, died. She was angry at herself for getting old. She was angry because she had a heart attack in London. Luckily, Penelope was with her. Penelope helped her. She took care of her and brought her home. Mrs. Alderman wanted Penelope to stay at Rosemont. The house was big. Penelope would be happy here, but Penelope did not want to stay. She missed London. Mrs. Alderman could not believe it. How could anyone prefer a small, dark flat to a big house with a beautiful garden? She looked at Patrick again. Uncle Eddie did that too, Patrick said. Why do you do it? Mrs. Alderman was surprised. She answered, When flowers die, we cut them off. Then new flowers can grow. This is called deadheading. Patrick said, Deadheading, so new flowers can grow. Yes, Patrick, she said. She looked at him again. Maybe he could help in the garden. He would be a free gardener. She smiled. Take this knife, Patrick. I will show you how to deadhead roses. Be careful. It is very sharp. It was your great-uncle Eddie's knife. Patrick took the knife. Now, cut this dead flower, she said. Cut it here. But Patrick did not cut the flower. He looked at the knife. Then he lifted it slowly. The sun shone on the sharp blade. Patrick, Mrs. Alderman said. She stepped back. The rose fell from her hand. The thorn scratched her arm. Then she felt terrible pain in her shoulder and neck. She screamed. Then she fell into the rose bushes. Patrick watched. When she stopped moving, he dropped the knife. He ran toward the house. Mummy! He shouted. Chapter 7. How Daphne's father died. Daphne and Ellie met at a cafe. They talked about their lives. Ellie joked about rich families, but Daphne shook her head. My father was a kind man, Daphne said. People came to him for help, but it was never easy. He had money, but life was still hard. Ellie asked, Is he still alive? Daphne's face changed. No, he died in a terrible accident. Ellie looked surprised. What happened? He went to check a church tower. A stone fell from the top and killed him instantly, Daphne said sadly. Ellie was shocked. That's awful. Daphne sighed. I always wonder if things would have been different if I hadn't argued with him before his death. Ellie wanted to comfort her, but just then, Baby Rose made a mess with her chocolate cake. They both laughed, and the mood lightened. That night, Ellie told Pasco about Daphne's father's death. Pasco was shocked. So he was killed by a falling stone? Another strange accident? Ellie frowned. You don't think Patrick had anything to do with it, do you? Pasco shook his head. I don't know. But too many deaths seem to happen around Patrick Alderman. Chapter 8. Daphne's Secret, Police Cadet. Shahid Singh was at the multi-story car park where Daphne Alderman's car was scratched. He stood there, thinking. Something about this case felt strange. He wanted to prove himself as a good policeman. Many officers still saw him as just a young cadet, not a real investigator. He was determined to change that. As he was about to leave, he saw 5 young boys step out of the lift. He recognized 2, Jaunty Marsh and Mick Fever, his old school friends. Hey, Shady, Jaunty called. What are you doing here? Looking for some idiots who scratched cars, Singh replied. Jaunty laughed. You think you can catch them alone? Singh stayed calm. I'm not alone. Other officers are watching from a hidden spot. The boys stopped laughing. Mick looked uneasy. Actually, Singh continued, we're really interested in one car. A woman's car. Do you know anything? The boys exchanged glances. Then Jaunty smirked. Yeah, we saw her. A blonde lady, another boy added. She got out of her car and walked straight into another one. "What car?" Singh asked. "A dark blue BMW," Mick said. Singh froze. He knew that car. It belonged to Richard Elgood. Why was Daphne Alderman secretly meeting him? Chapter 9. A strange friendship. Daphne Alderman sat in Richard Elgood's car, feeling nervous. She had told no one about this meeting, especially not Patrick. "You didn't tell your husband, did you?" Elgood asked, watching her closely. "No," Daphne said quickly. "I just needed someone to talk to." Elgood nodded. "I understand. You feel trapped in your life, don't you?" Daphne hesitated, then sighed. "Patrick is a good husband. He's kind to me and the children, but sometimes I feel like I don't really know him." Elgood leaned back. "That's not surprising. Patrick is different." Daphne looked at him. "What do you mean?" Elgood thought for a moment. "I've known Patrick for years. He always seems so calm no matter what happens. People around him keep having accidents, but Patrick never seems surprised. It's like he knows things before they happen." Daphne frowned. "Are you saying Patrick had something to do with those deaths?" Elgood smiled. "I'm saying you should be careful." Daphne didn't know what to say. She looked out of the window, feeling uneasy. "Why are you telling me this?" she finally asked. "Because I care," Elgood said softly. "I don't want you to get hurt." Daphne took a deep breath and opened the car door. "I should go." Elgood nodded but watched her carefully as she walked away. Daphne felt a chill as she stepped into the street. Was Patrick really the man she thought he was? Chapter 10. An Unexpected Visit. Detective Pascoe arrived at Elgood Ceramics to speak with Richard Elgood. Elgood looked annoyed but let him in. Pascoe sat down. "I need to ask about Daphne Alderman. We know she was in your car last Monday." Elgood smiled. "She needed someone to talk to. That's all?" "Why you?" Pascoe asked. "I've known Patrick for years," Elgood said. "I wanted to warn her. Strange things happen around Patrick." Pascoe leaned forward. "Like what?" Elgood sighed. "People around him die. First his great-uncle Eddie, then her father, then people at my company. Bulmer, Eagles, Burke. Patrick benefited from each death." "You think Patrick killed them?" Elgood shrugged. "I don't know, but he never looks surprised when bad things happen." Pascoe didn't respond, but he felt uneasy. Too many accidents, too many coincidences. As he left, he saw a blue rose in Elgood's office. A rare rose, just like the one Patrick had given him. Chapter 11. Patrick and the Roses. Sergeant Weald visited Rosemont House to talk to Patrick Alderman. Patrick was in the garden, trimming his roses. "You take your gardening seriously," Weald said, looking at the well-kept plants. Patrick smiled. "It's my passion. Roses need care and attention. Sometimes you must remove the weak flowers so the strong ones can grow." Weald nodded. "That's called deadheading, right?" Patrick laughed. "Yes, exactly." Weald looked around. "I heard about the deaths in your company. Bulmer, Eagles, Burke, and also your Uncle Eddie and Daphne's father. That's a lot of accidents." Patrick didn't stop trimming the roses. "Life is full of accidents, Sergeant." Wield watched Patrick. Chapter 12. A Visit to the Past. Pasco wanted to know more about Eddie Alderman, so he visited an old neighbor who had known him well. The man was happy to talk. Eddie was a smart man, the old neighbor said, a great accountant and a lover of gardens. He spent all his money on Rosemont House and his precious roses. He had no children, so after his death, his niece Penny Highsmith inherited everything. Pasco was surprised. Not Patrick. No, Patrick was just a boy then. His mother, Penny, took the house and the money. But Patrick grew up obsessed with the garden, just like Eddie. He always said Rosemont should have been his. Pasco thought about this. Patrick didn't inherit the house, but now he owns it. Somehow, he got what he wanted. Chapter 13. A Mother's Choice. Pasco found Penny Highsmith's address and went to visit her. She was an old, quiet woman living in a small flat. She looked surprised to see him. "I just need to ask you a few questions about Rosemont House," Pasco said. Penny sighed. "I haven't lived there in years. I gave it to Patrick." Pasco leaned forward. "Why?" Penny hesitated. "I had no choice. Patrick was just a child when Eddie died. He loved the house and garden so much. When he grew up, he wanted it more than anything. And I didn't want it. He told me it was the right thing to do, so I signed it over to him." "You just gave it away?" Pasco asked. Penny nodded slowly. "Patrick has a way of getting what he wants. He doesn't ask for things. He just makes you feel like you should give them to him." Pasco left, feeling uneasy. Patrick never had to fight for anything. Everything just came to him. But how? Chapter 14. Death in the Family. That evening, Pasco discussed the case with Ellie. He told her about Eddie Alderman, Penny Highsmith, and Rosemont House. Ellie listened carefully. "So first Eddie dies," Ellie said, thinking aloud. "Then Patrick's mother inherits the house, but later, she just gives it away to Patrick. Then Daphne's father dies, and Patrick marries her. Then at his job, people keep dying, and Patrick gets promotions. And now he has money, power, and the house he always wanted." Pasco nodded. "Exactly. Every time Patrick benefits." Ellie frowned. "But do you really think Patrick killed them all? You have no proof. These are just accidents." Pasco sighed. "Yes, but too many accidents make a pattern. Nobody ever questions them because Patrick never looks guilty. He is always calm, always in the background, and in the end, he always gets what he wants." Ellie shivered. "That's scary. It's like he doesn't even have to try. Things just happen for him." Pasco couldn't shake off the same feeling. Chapter 15. A Final Warning. A few days later, Richard Elgood called Pasco. "I need to see you. Urgent." Pasco met him at a hotel bar. Elgood looked nervous and shaken. He ordered a drink but barely touched it. "I made a mistake," Elgood said, his voice low. "I shouldn't have talked about Patrick." "Why?" Pasco asked, leaning forward. Elgood looked around, as if someone was watching him. "Because I don't want to end up like the others," he whispered. Pasco frowned. "The others?" Elgood swallowed hard. Everyone who gets in Patrick's way, something bad happens to them. First Eagles, then Burke. And now, he stopped and shook his head. Pascoe pressed him. What are you saying? Do you think Patrick is dangerous? Elgood met his eyes. I'm saying you should drop this case. Forget Patrick Alderman. Forget everything I told you. If you care about your life, stay away from him. Pascoe walked out of the hotel with a heavy feeling in his chest. He had never been scared of an investigation before, but for the first time, he felt like he was dealing with something much bigger and more dangerous than he ever expected. Chapter 16. Dalziel enjoys himself. Penny Highsmith and Andy Dalziel were having dinner together. They were in a nice restaurant, eating good food and drinking wine. Dalziel ate a lot, and Penny watched him with amusement. You are still the same, Andy, Penny said, smiling. I'm enjoying myself, Dalziel replied. It's good to see you again. Penny nodded. I was surprised when you found me in London. Was it just luck, or are you here for a reason? Dalziel grinned. Maybe both. I came for a conference, but I also wanted to see you. They talked about old times. Penny told him she liked living in London. She had only stayed in Yorkshire to take care of Aunt Florence. When Florence died, Penny got the house and money, but she never wanted to stay there forever. Patrick loves Yorkshire, she said. He still lives at Rosemont with his wife and children. I thought you would sell the house, Dalziel said. I almost did, Penny answered, but something happened. What? Dalziel asked. The buyer died, Penny said. Dalziel put down his fork. Died? How? It was an accident, Penny said. He ate a poisoned fruit. Maybe he picked an apple from a tree treated with chemicals. Nobody knows for sure. Dalziel thought for a moment. He looked at Penny carefully. Strange how people around Patrick always seem to have accidents, he said. Penny frowned. What do you mean? Dalziel smiled. Nothing, just thinking. More wine? Penny laughed. Yes, why not? Let's enjoy the evening. Dalziel poured the wine and changed the subject. He didn't want Penny to know what he was really thinking. Chapter 17. Dalziel has a wonderful time. Penny Highsmith and Andy Dalziel were having dinner in a restaurant. The waiters were surprised to see how much Dalziel ate. He enjoyed his food and wine. I'm so glad to see you again, Andy, Penny said. Dalziel smiled. And I'm happy to see you too. Did you find me by accident or was it planned? Penny asked. Dalziel laughed. Do you think I'm here to investigate something? Maybe, Penny said. But now I see you eating and drinking so much I don't think you are pretending. Dalziel nodded. No pretending. I'm having a great time. Penny laughed. I checked on you with Patrick when I saw him yesterday. Dalziel was surprised. Did he stay long? No, Penny said. He never does. We are not very close. But you raised him alone, Dalziel said. Why didn't you marry his father? That's none of your business, Penny said. Sorry, Dalziel said. It must have been hard. Some people were unkind to me, Penny said. But Aunt Flo and Uncle Eddie helped me. And then you got Rosemont and all the money, Dalziel said. Were you surprised when you heard the will? Penny looked at him. "There was no will," she said. Dalziel was quiet. He was thinking. He had heard something different from Penny's lawyer. But he didn't say anything. Instead, he smiled and poured more wine. "Let's enjoy our dinner," he said. Chapter 18. A big surprise for Daphne. Daphne Alderman woke up feeling that something important would happen today. She had been thinking a lot about her marriage. She wanted to be honest with Patrick. She wanted to fix things between them. Patrick was coming home from London that morning. When he arrived, he looked happy and relaxed. He was smiling, and he carried a bunch of beautiful roses. "They are so lovely, Patrick," Daphne said. "But I never thought you would buy roses." "Look at the label," Patrick said. Daphne looked. The name on the label was Daphne Alderman. She stared in surprise. "Do you remember?" Patrick said. "A long time ago, I told you I would create a new rose and name it after you. It took me 6 years, but now it's here." Daphne felt a mix of emotions. "Patrick, this is amazing." "That's not all," Patrick said, excited. "This rose will be sold everywhere, and I have written a book about it. It will be published with the rose. My dream is finally coming true." Daphne was shocked. She had no idea. She thought Patrick was hiding something bad. She thought he was in trouble. That was why she went to Dick Elgood for help. That was why Dick went to the police. But now she realized she had been wrong about everything. Patrick continued, "With the money from the rose and my book, I don't need to work with Dick anymore. I can tell him I don't want to join his company." Daphne felt tears in her eyes. "Oh, Patrick, I'm so happy." She had misunderstood everything, but now they could start fresh. She kissed Patrick passionately. Just then, the doorbell rang. Daphne suddenly remembered. The police were coming to talk about the burglary. She quickly explained this to Patrick and went to open the door. Inspector Pascoe and Sergeant Weald entered. Pascoe noticed how happy Daphne and Patrick looked. It was clear something good had just happened. "We've checked with the water company," Pascoe began. Chapter 19. Dick Elgood's Party. It was Saturday morning. Dick Elgood was in his office, waiting for a visitor. He was excited. Today was going to be important. A man wearing dark glasses and a hat entered. It was Raymond Easy, a private detective. Easy had been following Patrick Alderman. He had found something important. "I found this in his mother's flat," Easy said. He handed Dick a document. Dick looked at it carefully. It was a will. It showed that Patrick Alderman was never supposed to own Rosemont. The house had belonged to someone else. Dick smiled. "Does Patrick know about this?" "No," Easy said. "The will was lost. But now, you have it." Dick paid Easy a lot of money and sent him away. Then he picked up the phone and called Patrick. "I have something important for you," Dick said. "It's about your house. I think you should see it." There was a long pause. Then Patrick said, "I'm interested. Should I come to your office now?" "No," Dick replied. "Let's meet at my cottage tomorrow. I'm having a lunch party. Bring your family." Patrick agreed, but he did not sound surprised or worried. He was very calm. Dick put the will in his desk and smiled to himself. He was looking forward to tomorrow. Chapter 20. Shahid Singh sees some action. Shahid Singh and Weald were sitting in a bedroom at Rosemont. It was very quiet. The air smelled like roses from the garden below. Pascoe and another officer were also inside the house, while 2 more policemen waited in a car outside. Singh was excited. This was his first big police job. He wanted to catch a criminal. Weald, however, looked bored. The hours passed slowly. When morning came, Pascoe entered the room and yawned. "That's enough for now," he said. "Go downstairs and get some coffee. We'll try again tonight." As they went downstairs, Pascoe walked past Patrick Alderman's study. He suddenly heard a noise inside. Curious, he opened the door and was shocked to see Dalziel. Dalziel was sitting at Patrick's desk, looking through some papers. "Good morning, Peter," Dalziel said cheerfully. "Did you have a good night?" Pascoe frowned. "What are you doing here, sir?" "I thought you might need company," Dalziel replied. "Nothing happened, right? I didn't expect anything, but I let you have your fun." Pascoe was confused. What was Dalziel planning? Dalziel stood up. "Let's walk in the garden," he said. As they walked among the roses, Pascoe asked, "Do you still think Patrick Alderman is guilty?" Dalziel shrugged. "People die all the time, Peter. But we don't have any proof, do we? What we need is a body." Pascoe sighed. Dalziel sounded almost disappointed. They went back inside and ate breakfast with Weald and Singh. When they finished, Pascoe asked, "Are we leaving now?" Dalziel shook his head. "No, we're staying. We need to catch some burglars." He led them back upstairs and lay down on a bed. "Wake me when they come," he said. Then he closed his eyes. At around 8 a.m., they heard a noise outside. An old van drove into the garden. The words "Caldecott's son, gardeners" were written on it. "They're here," Dalziel said, sitting up. "The gardeners?" Pascoe asked. "You think it's them?" "There's Jaunty Marsh," Singh whispered. "And Arthur." Dalziel nodded. "It's a smart trick. People need their gardens taken care of, even when they're away. These men pretend to be gardeners, but they also watch the house. They choose what to steal." "So far, they are only working," Weald pointed out. "Just wait," Dalziel said. "One of them will cut the alarm. Another will enter the house. The others will stay outside, so nothing looks suspicious." Pascoe realized Dalziel was right. He was embarrassed. Dalziel had seen the truth while he had not. After a few minutes, they heard someone enter the house. "Let's go," Dalziel said. He turned to Singh. "You stay here. We don't want you to get hurt." They ran downstairs and found Arthur Marsh in the study. He was holding a bag full of stolen items. When he saw them, he tried to run. Dalziel threw himself forward and grabbed Arthur's leg. But Arthur was not the only thief. Jaunty Marsh, holding a heavy silver candlestick, pushed past Weald and ran upstairs. Weald chased him. There was shouting, a loud crash, and then silence. Weald entered the room and saw Singh lying on the floor. Blood was running from his head. Singh was unconscious. Weald looked out the window and saw the old van. A police car had blocked it. Then he heard another cry. He turned and saw Jaunty Marsh hanging from the window, terrified. Weald grabbed him and pulled him inside, but he was more worried about Sing. Was the young officer still alive? Chapter 21. Nothing Ever Really Changes. On Tuesday night, Dick Elgood arrived at his seaside cottage later than usual. He was too late to go swimming, and he felt lonely. The sound of the waves made him uneasy. But the next morning, the sun was shining, and he felt much better. After breakfast, he went for a swim. The cold water woke him up, making him feel fresh and strong. He returned to the cottage, ready for a shower. As he stood under the warm water, he felt something strange. His skin started to burn. At first, it was just a little pain. Then his eyes hurt like there was soap in them. He tried to open them to wash it out. Suddenly he screamed. His whole face felt like it was on fire. He stumbled out of the shower, trying to reach the sea. The salt water, he thought, might stop the pain. He ran outside, barely able to see. Finally, he fell into the waves. At the police station, Dalziel, Pascoe, and Weald had just visited Shahid Singh in the hospital. The young officer was hurt, but not badly. His head was covered in bandages, but he was smiling. He was proud. He had helped catch the burglars. Back at the station, Dalziel was in a good mood. But suddenly he got a phone call. He ran into Pascoe's office, shouting, "He's dead! Dick Elgood is dead!" Pascoe jumped up. "How?" "Drowned," Dalziel said. "They found his body in the sea near his cottage." "Was it an accident?" Pascoe asked. "We don't know yet," Dalziel said. "Find out." A few hours later, Pascoe had the answer.